in their ignorance, believing that it's God alone who can resurrect, which is true, but that it may appear, resurrection may appear to them when it is in fact not resurrection. They're not aware of that, not aware of the powers of the jinn, the powers of evil that do exist in the world. What will happen at that point is that two jinns will appear in the form of that person's father and mother, his dead parents. They will appear before him. And those two jinns will say to the person, "Oh, my dear son, or my little daughter, follow him because he is your Lord." And this will be a massive trial for people. And they will follow him. He will appear to give life to the dead, because he will cut people in half and command those halves to come back together, and they will come back together, and the person will come running before him, smiling, praising him. However, a young believer will confront him, will challenge him, and call him the Antichrist. And Dajjal will have him cut into pieces, cut into two halves, walk between the two halves, and then command it to come back together, and it will come back together. And then he will ask him, "Do you believe now that I am your Lord?" And he will say, "I am now even more certain that you are the false Christ." And Dajjal will grab him by the neck, and he will try to cut off his head. He will be unable, so Allah will put a shield there, a protective shield, which will not allow him to cut off the head. So he will hold him by the scruff of his neck and by his feet and throw him into that river of fire that's following him. And people will see him fall in and be consumed, burnt up. They will think he is destroyed. But the Prophet ﷺ said that he will be falling into paradise and that he is the greatest of the martyrs. He said, هَذَا أَعْظَمُ النَّاسِ شَهَادَةً عِنْدَ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. This young man is the greatest martyr in the sight of the Lord of the worlds. Now, where will Dajjal appear? He will first appear in the east. Prophet ﷺ stated, as quoted by Abu Bakr, the Dajjal will appear from a land in the east called Khurasan, and will be accompanied by people whose faces look like flat beaten iron. However, he will run into conflict with Muslims, Muslim forces between Syria and Iraq. Abu Umama quoted the Prophet ﷺ as saying he will appear from a pass between Syria and Iraq and create havoc from left and right. This is where the confrontation with Muslim forces begins. And his followers will include many Jews. The Anas ibn Malik related the Prophet ﷺ said some 70,000 Jews from Asfahan wearing shawls will follow the Dajjal. And actually, when you go back into Christian literature, some of it does make reference to the followers of the Antichrist as being from among the Jews. But as I said before, they do generalize and say that anybody who denies the divinity of Jesus becomes an Antichrist. So even Muslims during the times of the Crusades, when they were trying to rouse up support to attack Muslim lands, Palestine, etc., they did use this phrase that the Muslims were the Antichrist. Anyway, his reign, he will rule on the earth some 40 days. The first day will be as long as 1 year, and the second as long as a month, and the third as long as a week, and the rest of the days will be like regular days. The companions, when the Prophet ﷺ related that to them, they asked him, what should we do in terms of our prayer on that first day? Will 5 prayers suffice? A day, which will be like a year? And the Prophet ﷺ had said, no. You must estimate the times of prayer and pray accordingly. And it's on the basis of this statement that the Prophet ﷺ made with regards to the coming of Dajjal that the scholars, give rulings concerning those people who live in regions where you have 6 months of daylight and 6 months of night, or circumstances where there may not be any night, or the night becomes so small it's virtually non-existent, that in those places they estimate, they calculate the times. We have things like the Asr watch, and I'm not the salesman for Asr watch, but Asr watch, no matter where you go on the main cities on the earth, you can press it and it'll tell you what are your times for prayer in your area, that you will be able to estimate it wherever you are. Anyway, in terms of the end of the Antichrist, Dajjal, he will appear after the Mahdi appears. The Mahdi, who will lead Muslim forces in a major battle with the forces of falsehood in the earth and establish a rule of Allah on the earth for a period. But in the course of his establishment of that rule, the Antichrist will appear. And his forces will defeat the Muslim forces left and right until Muslims become, the main Muslim forces become besieged in Jerusalem. And there, in Fajr prayer, after Prophet Isa returns, because he will return in Damascus at this point, and he will go to Jerusalem and join that prayer. And when the Mahdi standing in the front sees him come, he will ask him to come forward and lead the prayer. But Jesus will push the Mahdi forward and have him lead the prayer as he was already designated. And when the prayer ends, the forces of Dajjal will be on the gates of Jerusalem. The gates will break open, the forces will come through, and at this point, the Dajjal will spot Prophet Jesus. And when he spots him, Prophet ﷺ said he will begin to dissolve, like the way salt does when water drops on it. And he will start to run. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if he had been left, he would just have dissolved completely. But Prophet Isa will run after him, catch him, and he will kill him and raise his spear, which is used to kill him, in his hand, to show the people that in fact Dajjal has been killed. And a massive battle will ensue in which all of the forces that were supporting Dajjal will be defeated across the earth, and Prophet Isa will reestablish the rule of Allah over the earth. Now, how do we defend ourselves against Dajjal? And before actually looking at our defense, I should mention that there are some narrations which indicated that there were individuals in the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ who were mistakenly thought to have been Dajjal. There was an individual by the name of Ibn Sayyad, whom Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, on one occasion, because he had heard things being said about him, he was involved in doing certain prophecies, though he was quite young, and the Prophet ﷺ suspected that perhaps he might be a Dajjal. So he went to see him, and they found him as a youth playing amongst other youths, and he walked up to him without him seeing him from behind, and then touched him on the shoulder and said to him, "Will you bear witness that I am the messenger of Allah?" And Ibn Sayyad will say, "I bear witness that you are a messenger to the Gentiles." And in fact, he will then turn to the Prophet ﷺ and say, "Do you bear witness that I am a messenger of Allah?" Very arrogant. And the Prophet ﷺ will ask him, "What do you see?" Because he was reading people's minds and predicting things. "What do you see? What does your messenger tell you? What is in my mind?" And he will attempt to read the Prophet ﷺ's mind. And he will say, "Ad-dukh, ad-dukh." But he can't go any farther than that. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Enough." He was reflecting on Surah Ad-Dukhan. And he said, "You will not go beyond your station." He realized at that point that this is not really Dajjal. But Ibn Umar when he heard the Prophet ﷺ